Imagine Vajrasattva on the crown of your head with his body made of white light. And really focus on him being made of light, not something solid. And then Vajrasattva melts into a ball of light that comes into you through the crown of your head. And as soon as Vajrasattva, this ball of light, enters you, your whole body dissolves into light. So think that your whole body is simply a ball of light. And as a ball of light, you have no race, you have no ethnicity, you have no sex, you have no gender, you have no nationality, you have no sexual orientation, you have no state of being young or old, of being attractive or unattractive, of being fit or unfit, of being healthy or unhealthy. So think all those identities that you hold on to based on your body are now not there. It's just a clear ball of light. So those identities are impossible to hold with having a body that's a ball of light. Now imagine functioning in the world without those identities that are based on your body. So men no longer have extra physical strength or height or louder voices. Women no longer have to be concerned about sexual abuse or about being overpowered in a meeting by men. So you have no gender and you relate to the world that way. So think what would have to change in your mentality to let go of your gender, your identity. So not that you became another gender, but that there just was no gender identity at all in the world. How would your mind change? Because your body is a ball of light, you have no race, you have no ethnicity, and neither does anybody else. So how would your mentality change if you functioned in a society where there was no race? Not where you were a different race, where there's, dominant and lower races or anything. There's just no race, no ethnicity. How would the way you feel about yourself change? How would the way you relate to the world change? Now look into the hearts of all the other beings, near and far, who all have bodies made of light. And what do you see in their hearts? What is most important to each and every living being? It's their wish to be happy and safe, and their wish to not suffer. So focus on that, as that pertains to every living being. Humans, in the sex, doesn't matter what kind of living beings. It's the most important thing in everybody's mind. We're all completely the same in that regard. And if everybody's the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, and nobody has any identity based on their body, nationality, or whatever, then can you generate great love and great compassion for all of them without any discrimination between friend, enemy, and stranger? So there's no fear of any other living being at all, and no sense of being different than any other living being. And then think that your body, which is a ball of light, slowly takes the form of Vajrasattva. And as the wise and compassionate being Vajrasattva, you relate to the rest of the world. So what changed in how you saw yourself and how you related to others?
It didn't matter which identity I chose. It was like each one came with a script, and the script absolutely limits how I can function.
The script.
The script limits how I function.
Yep.
It absolutely sort of traps the mind in a certain view. And then the more identities we have, of course we've got many, the more we're sort of squeezed into this little tiny crumple of paper that can barely function. And then seeing the world from that point of view that's so limited is a tragedy.
What came up for me was it very similar that was just shared is it felt like, well, it kept me in samsara. So that was my big takeaway. I did have a question this morning, and it was off of you sharing your story about deconstructing identities, and I'm curious to see, did that also include deconstructing the identity of being a Buddhist?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, your identity as a Buddhist. Yeah. All the identities.
I noticed that at first I was grasping at the identities as they were dissolving, and I was thinking, oh, well, if I'm not young, then I'm old. Or if I'm not this, then I must be that, and I don't want to be that. But it was such a relief. And I was looking around, I was imagining, the whole room. There's things like, well, I can't judge people. Nor I wouldn't judge people, and I wouldn't judge myself. And I wouldn't be comparing myself to others. And it was just this huge relief.
Yeah.
And much easier to develop equanimity and love and compassion. Yeah, thank you.
I noticed a lot of fear and isolation that comes with these identities, and the comparing and how we're completely different. There's nothing that's common between us. And then I did have this very expansive feeling of equanimity, and it was amazing once that was dissolved. It was quite an experience.
Yeah. And it's amazing that all these identities are made by the mind. They're all constructed by thought. There's no other reality to them.
I realized that a lot of the communities I am part of would kind of lose their boundaries because there would no longer be something to distinguish who can be and cannot be part of the communities. So all of these walls would come down.
I have to share this one experience I had. I met, this was when I was in my early 20s. I met a guy named David. And I was kind of attracted to David. A few weeks later, I saw David, and David was Daviad. And I was like, you've changed. I mean, I had a crush on you. And now it was Daviad, and I was really stumped. So it was really a confusing thing for me. And of course, we talked it all out, and I decided it was way too confusing for me to get involved with. So, but it was an interesting thing to have, someone change from day to day or week to week.
Yeah. And how much we relate to other people based on identities that are formed, that are based on the body.
So I have a question about identity that is linked to an actual phenomena, an experience. So, for example, birthing a child. I have not birthed a child, so I'm not a mother in that sense. So I don't necessarily carry that identity right at this point, or someone who actually fathers a child. So I understand it's conceptual and somewhat created by our culture, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there are mothers and fathers conventionally, but again, it's, identities that are formed by conception. A mother is this, a father does this, Am I understanding your question?
Yeah, I didn't actually put it in a question. Sorry, maybe it's not well formulated in my mind. So I'll just keep listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I haven't had a child either, but even if somebody's had a child, you aren't having a child all the time. Yeah. Yes, mother.
Well, I thought I'd just comment. I have had 2 babies, and it's interesting because being here is really hard because I'm away from them. I mean, they're 5 and 7, right? I should be old hat at this. But it's funny because when I sit and meditate, it is such a strong part of my identity. I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids. They're waiting for me at home, all these things. And at the same time, they could, disappear. I mean, they could not exist anymore. And, that's a really interesting, powerful thing for me I've thought about prior to this conversation. And I think that, I don't know if that answers your question at all, but yes, they've become a huge part of my identity, and being a mom is a huge, but also at the same time, it's totally conditional and could disappear at any moment, I guess. So it is a strong identity, but like Venerable says, we're not constantly in labor, so that part goes away,
Yeah.
and then even your kids can go away, I guess. So it is in the moment a strong part, but at the same time very fragile.
Yeah. And the identity as a mother is going to change as you get older and as the kids get older. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes creates difficulties in families is the actual circumstance change, but the mind doesn't. So your kid is 20 years old and there's still 20 months in your eyes. Yeah.
For me, after a few minutes, I went to a place of, this is really great, and I feel really open and connected, but I also was thinking about, like, I'm going to get bored. Like, who's going to push me to grow? Who's going to, I felt like I might become an amoeba, right? Just kind of bounce around with everybody. So I had that experience of like worrying about, like, how am I going to grow and learn and things if we're all the same. So that was one of my experiences.
Yeah. As if, the only way to grow and learn is to hit against something else. Mm.
Had a similar experience. At first, it was just very pleasant, and I was thinking of equanimity, and everything was beautiful. And then I said, "Well, how am I going to know who everybody is?" And I started making them different colors. And I went, "Oh my goodness!" I had to end the meditation because it was obvious I didn't go anywhere with it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, this one. I remember Lama always talking about how we discriminate this and that. We're always discriminating this and that and this and that all the time, this and that, this and that. And to the point that when we start thinking about the emptiness of inherent existence, it's very scary. The realization of what will liberate us from samsara scares us and terrifies us because we're afraid that we're going to disappear and everybody else is going to disappear. And then who am I? And then, like you said, what am I going to learn? What am I going to do? What's going to be interesting to me? Yeah, we have to have all these, different colored differences. And then when our discriminating mind starts focusing on all these differences, what do we come up with? Conflict. Yeah? So it's interesting that in some way we're attached to conflict because it makes us feel alive. And we're attached to being different and feeling like we don't belong because that way we know we exist. And yet, this mind that grasps the self as some kind of independent thing, is the root of all of our misery. Isn't that interesting? Yeah? How attached we are to the root of our misery. How terrified we are of knowing the actual nature, how things exist, how we ourselves actually exist. When you see that, then you understand why the Buddha said that sentient beings were ignorant. Yeah, look at the depth of our ignorance, that we are afraid of the liberating path, that we're afraid of the truth. Yeah. So, this is what it means to be an ignorant sentient being. Yeah. If we dissolve into emptiness, life is going to be so boring. Yeah. Because our mind of attachment thrives on differences. Yeah, the mind of attachment is like, oh, this is different than that, so I like this and I don't like that, and I want this and I don't want that. And yet that very, that attachment to all the differences also limits us and keeps us in prison and makes us pretty miserable.
Could you offer some clarity on the identities that Buddhas hold in terms of their manifestations? I know that a lot of that is from our side and they're benefiting us, but how does that vary?
Yeah, they're appearing in different forms for our benefit. I don't think Manjushri's going there and saying, look, I'm a guy. So Tara, shut up because I'm going to run this meeting. I don't want any feminist, mouthing off here. So Tara Vajrayogini, I don't care if there's 108 Taras, shut up. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay? So when they talk about how things actually exist, they say by merely name. Okay? So that means that there's some basis of designation that itself is actually pretty amorphous. But our conceptual mind puts things together and gives it a name. And as soon as we give it a name, whoop, it gets concretized. Okay? For a Buddha, you give it a name, it doesn't get concretized. It's just a name is some easy way to communicate with things.
When Guy Newland was here last time, didn't he talk about a sutra in which there was a being who showed up as a female and one of the monks was giving her a hard time and she goes, what do you think a body is?
Oh yeah, that's the sutra. It happens in Vimalakirti. It also happens in the Sri Devi something sutra. Yeah.
The other comment was, as soon as you said that, I felt a lot of unease because I think people who are not part of the dominant culture feel like they're being erased a lot. Like, I don't see color and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so then I said, okay, switch this. So you think you're just going to become this light ball and it's just going to be the same. So what privileges and smugness am I going to have to give up if I'm just a ball of light and not this person who has assumed all this time that I get my way? And
yeah, I mean, everybody loses their identity. And like I said, people can be very, if we cling to our identity, this meditation can drive you nuts, especially in a world where we are so identity conscious now. So identity conscious. Yeah? And that's why I think this, some people could go, I'm a minority, you're erasing my identity. I remember, some of you may remember Marcia, an African-American woman who came to Cloud Mountain retreats. So she and I were friends, and we were taking a walk one day and talking about race. And I was asking her, I can't remember exactly what, but maybe it was something, about how she felt as being the only African-American person at that Cloud Mountain retreat. And she said it was because we, how we are, how I lead things, and, and she said it was the first time where I was invisible to myself. Yeah? And for her, that was a big relief, to be invisible to herself. Yeah? To not keep yourself apart because of holding on to a certain identity. Yeah. So it's interesting for me because I've lived in many cultures where I have not been part of the dominant group. Yeah, when you live in a Tibetan monastic culture, you are very aware that you are not part of the dominant group and that you are definitely lesser than, and especially being a woman. So I think it actually can be quite a huge relief to be invisible to ourselves.
Okay. So I've been thinking about this since the session this morning, and I was thinking about how, I guess the term dependent arising, I was thinking about this, how as we're talking about identities, there's many reasons that it seems more prevalent now, but I don't think it is as prevalent, it's just more publicized.
Yeah.
And also, I think one of the dynamics that also keeps this going is that how we relate to people as if they were that thing. Mm-hmm. So we further reinforce that. And let's say it's groups that are marginalized. So we reinforce that marginalization with our actions and our words. And so it keeps reinforcing itself because you're saying you're this because of the way maybe you're looking at them or treating them. And so then I think it could cause folks to feel like they are the ones who are being pushed into the box. Mm-hmm. And they're just saying, we just exist and we want to be treated equally, but that's not how we're being treated. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, it's important that we examine how we also treat others. Like how are we reinforcing those ways that we think of other people?
Yeah.
Because I think we otherize people a lot.
Right. And we otherize people based on our clinging to our identity. Because if I am this, then other people are that. So we treat other people in a way that reinforces their identity, but we also reinforce our own identity. And then we're stuck in, pain and suffering because everybody's saying, hey, I have an identity and you don't understand it. And what I've been saying, about how, I find it so interesting, because, and this is going to push buttons, okay. White men are now a discriminated against group. Okay? They're complaining that, that nobody sees them, there's so many stereotypes, there's all this prejudice against them, and that's where we get the alt-right and these guys, in Charlottesville. So they're holding on to an identity, yeah? And of course, putting identities on other people. And so that's why I think it's really important for all of us to really understand that our identities are created by our own mind. Other people may treat us in a certain way. We have the choice of buying into it or not buying into it. I know that as children, we don't have an ability, to discriminate. So what we're told as kids, we believe. Yeah, and this is regarding all sorts of things, not just identity, but all sorts of things. The nice thing about getting older is we can look at what we've been conditioned to believe, and we can say, do I want to continue to believe that? And I think it's important to always realize we have a choice. Yeah? It can be difficult to find the choice when we have a lot of conditioning around us telling us the opposite. Okay, so when we have social conditioning or family conditioning, and when we've bought into that conditioning, whatever it is, it's hard to find the choice. But if we can stay quiet, and this is where I think, I'm talking from a Buddhist viewpoint, which deconstructs identities, doesn't form one, forms them. I'm not talking from an activist viewpoint. I'm talking from a Buddhist viewpoint. And if we realize there's a choice in there, then we can see, okay, other people may see me that way. That doesn't mean I have to see myself that way. And other people in my group may see other people a certain way. Or my family may see people in a certain way. But that doesn't mean I have to see other people in the same way that my family does. Before we came into here, we'll come back to you, Cheryl. Hold on. Venerable Pende was talking to me about being Vietnamese American. And would you share with the group what you said to me?
I think instead of holding my identity very tight, I think I've been practicing to combine the best of Vietnamese culture and Western culture. And living at the Abbey has given me the precious opportunity to connect to all the guests from all around the world. So I got the chance to learn from a lot of people. And that, to me, I think is very beautiful and very powerful.
Yeah. And she also said, I don't have to always be around Vietnamese people and think like Vietnamese people. I can just be a person, without clinging to a certain nationality. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Cheryl?
I actually just wanted to add just one other thing, which is like also in our quest for equanimity and getting rid of identities, to also at the same time realize conventional existence and conventionally how people are treated according to how they are perceived.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just adding that because I've encountered in my experience people going, oh, we're all one, and and it's like, but there are people who are suffering real consequences, like getting killed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera,
right,
because of who they are perceived to be, and all that other stuff. At least, so I just really wanted to add that to not erase that there are things that exist, but it's the hanging on to them that I think creates the
exactly.
The problems,
In samsara, what you said is completely true. Yeah. The thing I'm saying is, do we want to keep our mind in samsara? The world around us keeps their mind in samsara. Do I want to join them? No. I have too much of my mind in samsara as it is. I don't want to solidify that. But I recognize other people have that.
So I had a question actually sort of ties into that. So I'm not a black person. I was never a mother. And they have a shared knowledge that I don't necessarily have.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you don't construct an identity out of it, maybe you could comment, so they can look at each other, across the room, and they're like, girl, and, make an instant contact and kind of understand each other, but I cannot. So I don't know, maybe you could comment on, what do you do with that, I guess?
See, this is part of the thing. If we construct an identity of my identity is like this, you look like me, so you have a similar identity, and you don't look like me, so you have a different identity. And when we look at people, what we see is the differences, then everybody's going to be quite different, and it's going to be real difficult. That's why in the meditation, I had everybody look into every single living being's heart, human being or not human being, in this country or not in this country. In other countries, the whole thing of race is very, very different than it is in this country. And to look into everybody's heart and, hey, we all want happiness. We all don't want to have experienced suffering. And if we went around the room, I don't care what color people are or what ethnic, or what sexual orientation or whatever it is, everybody has some suffering and feels left out and misunderstood. I guarantee that. Yeah. This was my big discovery after I left high school. In high school, I don't know about your high school, but my high school, there were cliques. So there were the cliques of the socias in my high school. The socias were the social kids, the football players and the cheerleaders. Yeah? So they're the ones who were the homecoming queen and the homecoming king. And they're the ones who were real popular, who everybody wanted to look like and be like. And they set the standard for the school. Remember in high school? Yeah? Wasn't it the same for everybody? Okay? Now, I don't know about you, but I was not one of those kids. I was some kind of other kid. A little bit nerdy, a little bit this, a little bit that. I didn't really belong anywhere. Okay? And I looked at those kids and thought, wow, they really belong. They're the in crowd. They don't feel insecure and excluded and left out like I feel. Okay? And then, went away to college. And then I talked to some of the kids I went to high school with, and I talked to kids who had been the equivalent of socias in their high schools. And they told me that they felt like they didn't belong, that they were left out, that they weren't the in kids. And I was shocked. It was like, but wait, you're the, ones everybody looked up to. Everybody thought we should look like you and act like you and be like you. And you're telling me that you felt like you didn't belong and you felt left out and insecure? I was shocked. And that opened my mind completely to a thing of don't judge other people and don't think I know somebody else's internal experience. Yeah. So that's why I think it's very, why I said all of us can go around. Some people have health concerns that nobody else knows about, and they feel discriminated against because we treat them like they should be the same, even though they have health concerns. I mean, every one of us can find, I'm sure at least 5 ways in which we do not belong to the group that is sitting here in this room. And we can separate ourselves out. And other people can look at us and separate us out too, why we're different. But from a Buddhist viewpoint, what we want to do is look beyond those fabrications that are based on the foundation of grasping a true existence, that are based on ignorance, and look into everybody's heart and see everybody simply wants to be happy and not suffer. And everybody deserves to be happy and not suffer. Basta, finito. Yeah. And that's the way, as a practitioner, I've been training my mind. Okay. So yes, all the rest of the stuff, the craziness in samsara exists. And people are hooked into it and they suffer because of it. I'm not negating that. But I'm saying I don't want to jump into the filth. I'm doing my best to recondition my mind. She has a mic.
I can post two different opponent opinions at the same time.
Very well put, because that's the way we are often, isn't it? Yeah, we believe two opposite things at the same time, almost.
I was just thinking how pretty much throughout my life, and I guess I've been in lucky circumstances, I've never really felt the strong identification with gender. You know, there was very female, sort of female, more male, and it was like a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only when I, became a monastic that I was pushed into this identity of being female.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so confronting, because it is when going, when leaving behind the household life, leaving behind the worldly life, I am confronted with this very worldly, forced identification.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a, I don't know.
So I know what you're
Conundrum.
talking about. So you and I understand each other in a way that nobody else, well, except they haven't lived in India. Some of the ones here, they haven't lived in India and had our experiences. So we really bond because we understand. Nobody else understands. And those monks over there, I don't know about. Yeah.
I am Dutch, and we are very special in terms of gender. We are very tolerant, and so we're still different.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean you and I are different? I can't be Dutch? You can be American. You don't want to be. We're the greatest nation in the world. You don't want to be part of us? Oh, you want to be Russian like them, huh? Yeah.
We are Europe.
Yeah. Okay. So do you see what we do? It just gets to a point where it's like, give me a break already. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, for me, just what you said, I'll talk about our identity that nobody else understands. Yeah, and how we're victims of, the patriarchal religious structure that sees us as inferior. And it's true, they do. Yeah. I had a friend, an American friend, who studied in the dialectic school just a few years ago. So this is a recent story. And in the dialectic school, his teacher asked, who was a Tibetan monk, asked the other people in this class, who were all Tibetan monks, except my friend who was American, and there was a European nun, and asked them, all the other monks, who's superior, men or women? And all the monks said, men are superior and women are inferior. Yeah, except the European nun and my American friend who was male. Yeah? So you see, it proves they're discriminating against us and we have no chance and we're, suppressed. And, I could tell you gazillions of stories, well, maybe not gazillions, but many stories of the prejudice I faced being a woman in the Tibetan community and being white in the Tibetan community. And you know what? I am so sick of it. I am so sick of holding that identity and feeling, discriminated against and not given equal opportunity. I'm so sick of it. Yeah. So, yeah, because it gets you nowhere. You go round and around circles. Yeah, and we have all the reasons to prove our case. And so what? It's like, I'm sick of putting myself in that box. Okay? So they put me in the box. What to do? Yeah, I just go about and do my own thing. Yeah, I don't have to buy into their box. When I live in that culture, I'm limited by what I'm able to do. But there's also, ways to get around things. And the biggest thing to get around is our own mind that likes to dwell in how I don't fit in and how they don't let me fit in. Yeah, because I wanted to go to one of the monasteries in the south and learn Tibetan and learn debate, and I couldn't do it. Yeah, that's a big thing, to be discriminated against when you can't get the kind of education you want. Okay? I am so sick of, talking about making a deal. It's just like, I have better things to do in my life now. Mm-hmm. Don't get stuck in it.
Related to that, the monks discriminated in Tibet.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for enlightenment, and how do they justify their behavior?
How they're looking for enlightenment, and how do they justify their behavior?
With themselves.
I don't know. I wish I understood it. What it seems to me is that many people, I don't understand. Yeah, I can't explain why they think the way they think. Yeah, it's cultural conditioning, but why don't they question it? That's the question. Why don't they question their cultural conditioning? Yeah. Hold on. Yeah, she's been around Tibetans a lot. Yeah?
Well,
yeah.
The point the point I wanted to make was slightly different, actually. It was not about Tibetans.
Oh, that's okay. Make your other point.
But it's related because it's this thing of, the strength of the cultural conditioning. And I guess this conversation is really important in how to, the Buddhist perspective of transcending the identities. But I've been having this kind of like unease this morning, this afternoon, because part of it is also, it's like in having this conversation, I think it's also important to acknowledge some of the positive aspects that are going on conventionally on a level of society, that we're going through a transformation where we're kind of like trying to emerge into a more diverse society that's more tolerant and open, and that the whole identity issues that are emerging in discussions are related to that. And so there are really positive things that are going on. And so I think when having the conversation, I think it's like holding both. And even conventionally, of course, there's the shadow sides of all the identity, all of that. But it's like, I think the positive aspect also has to be kind of like voiced and acknowledged.
Do you want to explain?
just responding to what you said, and I would just say, just look around in this room. I mean, it's quite a diverse group, and I'm really struck by it a lot of times. It was right before that thing happened in Charlottesville. I had written a letter. I wanted to, sometimes I write a letter and send it to everybody that I know, because I don't write very often. And I was looking around at the Abbey, and we had people from so many different places here. And then actually after the thing happened in Charlottesville, I lost the heart to send it. You know, but I think that we have to hold on, as you're saying. I mean, just to that. And I was thinking, like, when you talked about I can't remember her name right now, Feeling Invisible. Can you tell me her name again?
Oh, Marcia?
Yeah, Marcia.
Yeah.
I know her too. I really don't think I could have understood that unless I had put on these robes and then gone to Emory to a Buddhist event. And I just really got what you were talking about in my one little immersion of going from somebody who was a woman in the university, you know, doing well, to putting on these robes and being in a Buddhist setting in the university. And it's like, it was really strange. And I would have been better to have felt invisible, because I felt so, I wasn't used to the interactions in that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just like, wow, I'm on the lowest of the totem pole here. I've never felt that way in a social setting like that before. I felt it in other ways, but not, I wasn't quite expecting that. I feel like up at the women's college here, you know, how they say that women flourish in women's colleges because they can just like do everything. In a sense, I feel that's kind of what it's like here. We can do everything, you know, and they think, you know, like Venerable Wu Yin is taking pictures of us driving tractors because people out here are using chainsaws. It's like, you just take care of the place and it's no big deal. But to some people, it's like, wow, look at that. I don't know. For me, I've not paid much attention to this. You know, I just don't let it get in my way. I just, with these things, I think I'm a little bit like one of my Vinaya masters felt about the Guru Dharmas. He was asked this question, my preceptor, and he just said, we ignore it. They don't discuss it. They just go on. And I think it's because they found it too divisive. The conversations would only be divisive and not be harmonious. So I'm not saying don't, Cheryl, I'm not saying we have to work against the social injustices, but we can't let things go to the place where we can't even have civil conversations, and where we can't be harmonious in dialogue with people. So if it can't be harmonious, then what's the point?
Yeah. Okay. Oh my goodness. I think we need some meditation right now. Okay?
Discrimination.
Yeah, that's what you get for being Filipino American. You know? Oh, and an anagarika. Yeah, look. You don't have the prestige that we have, you know? Right, girls? Yeah. Okay, so let's settle the mind a little bit, you know. Let's just come back and let's do something together, like recite the mantra together. Samaya Manipalaya Vajrasattva Patita Dita Mebawa Sitakaya Mebawa Subakaya Mebawa Anarata Mebawa Sarasiti Membayasa Sarakama Sutame Sitashar Kurhang O Bhagawan Saratatagata Vajramame Musa Vajrabhava Samaya Sattva Umpe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dinapatita Didameva Sitakaya Meva Supakaya Meva Anaratu Meva Sarvasiddhi Mepayasa Sarakama Sutame Sitam Shankara Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Saratatakata Vajramame Mitsa Vajrabhavama Samaya Sakha Humpe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dinapatita Didameva Sitakaya Meva Supakaya Meva Anaratu Meva Sarvasiddhi Mepayasa Sarakama Sutame Sitam Shankara Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatathagata Vajramame Vitsa Vajrabhavama Samaya Sakha Humpe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dinapatita Didameva Sitakaya Meva Supakaya Meva Anarata Meva Sarvasiddhi Mepayasa Sarakama Sutame Sitam Shankara Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatathagata Vajramame Vitsa Vajrabhavama Samaya Sakha Humpe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dinapatita Didameva Sutakaya Meva Supakaya Meva Anaratu Meva Sarvasiddhi Mepayasa Sarakama Sutame Sitam Shankara Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatathagata Vajramame Vitsa Vajrabhavama Samaya Sakha Humpe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dinapatita Didameva Supakaya Meva Supakaya Meva Anarata Meva Sarvasiddhi Mepayasa Sarakama Sutame Sitam Shankara Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatathagata Vajramame Vitsa Vajrabhavama Samaya Sakha Humpe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dinapatita Didameva Supakaya Meva Anaratu Meva Sarvasiddhi Mepayasa Sarakama Sutame Sitam Shankara Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatathagata Vajramame Vitsa Vajrabhavama Samaya Sakha